Welcome everybody. So I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review, and this is going to be for the movie Knowing. This movie is directed by Alex Proyas and stars Nicolas Cage as John Kostler, Rose Byrne as Diana. This movie is about a series of cataclysmic events that are going to be happening in the near future, and Nicolas Cage's son Caleb ends up actually getting these predictions from a time capsule, which Lucinda was Rose Byrne's actual mother, and she was able to kind of predict future events by writing down sort of a series of numbers and numerology that they're talking about in the actual film. This movie also stars Ben Mendelsohn, and he plays Phil Beckman. You know, Phil Beckman's character is more or less the friend to Nicolas Cage's character. They're both MIT professors, and what's pretty interesting enough is that Nicolas Cage's father actually was a professor, and so this borrows heavily on his father's influence. This is mostly a father and son journey. Caleb eventually gets the Lucinda note when they have a sort of a school celebration for the time capsule. Subsequently afterwards, he sort of discovers that, you know, these numbers are special, that they actually mean something, pretty much similar to the Bible code, and that there's actually something hidden within these series of numbers. He starts looking these things up, and he's originally not amused by it. He doesn't actually believe in this stuff, but it actually points toward natural disasters and things like that, such as 9/11 and, you know, various other plane crashes. Hopefully I don't get demonetized for saying that, but whatever. And, you know, this leads to a huge plane crash sequence, which is probably one of the coolest plane crash sequences ever in film history. There's a bunch of cool action sequences that happen within this film, and Nicolas Cage and his son are pretty much at the forefront of it. After this plane crash sequence happens, you know, Nicolas Cage is rather flustered by it. Phil Beckman actually comes to his aid to try and calm Nicolas Cage's character down, and John is pretty much blabbering on about the fact that, you know, these numbers mean something, that they're important, that he has to kind of look them up in order to try and save the world. And Beckman's character is like, part of me is telling me to actually believe you, to actually trust you, and what you're saying is true, but the other half is trying to tell me that I should be done with your shit and that I shouldn't ever actually contact you again. And Nicolas Cage's character just keeps on pressing forward with this information that he's getting. He eventually goes to meet the teacher that had Lucinda's messages and stuff originally, and he talks to her. He tries to get information out of her, asking if she could actually meet her in person, but the professor actually tells Nicolas Cage's character that she has been dead for at least a few years now, and that what she left behind is pretty much the only information he has for him. And so Nicolas Cage goes to track down Rose Byrne and pretty much tries to tell her that her mother actually is gifted and has some sort of ability that can predict the future. She doesn't originally believe in what Nicolas Cage is telling her, and she pretty much views him as a crazy person. There's another attack on a subway train that happens, and Nicolas Cage pretty much predicts it. He calls via a payphone and tries to warn the police department that this is going to happen, that this is not a joke. They should pretty much take this seriously. They don't really take it as seriously as they should have. They do have police presence there. Eventually something does happen in this train sequence. It's probably the most horrifying train sequence ever put on film. And, you know, you see a train go off the track and it crashes into several poles and runs over a bunch of people, killing them pretty much instantly before coming to a stop with Nicolas Cage trapped inside another train. And this pretty much sets in forth the motion that the fact that there is going to be a cataclysmic event, which is a solar flare. In this movie, Nicolas Cage actually plays sort of a normal person, which is kind of cool to see Nicolas Cage's character be sort of a normal character within this movie. Usually he plays sort of these quirky characters that have sort of a tick to them, whereas in this movie he's pretty much playing his father, which, like I said, a actual professor in school. So he's kind of drawing from his own life experiences, and I think this movie is freaking great. There's a scene in this movie where Nicolas Cage and Caleb are having dinner, and he's cooking hot dogs, and Caleb is not really paying attention. He doesn't really care. He's looking up at the stars, and he pretty much tells his dad that he's become a vegan now, and that, you know, he doesn't really eat that stuff anymore, and goes upstairs to watch a Discovery Channel documentary. He's pretty much into National Geographic stuff, and this kid is really, really intelligent for a kid of that age. You know, he's pretty smart, and I think this actor, this young child actor, actually probably will have a good future if he continues to do what he's doing with this movie. And this movie came out in the early 2000s, so, you know, this movie has really good special effects that even to this day hold up. There's a solar flare sequence that happens at the end. Nicolas Cage actually gets these predictions that this is going to happen, and, you know, he kind of sees on this sort of monitor display the activities of the sun, and he shows it to Ben Mendelsohn's character, who kind of flips out, and he's like, how am I supposed to stop this from happening if I can't even save the world? And he gets these predictions that, you know, it's not just for him or his son, that it's pretty much for everybody, that there's going to be this big huge solar flare that's going to wipe out in the existence of human civilization on Earth. And at first he doesn't really believe it. He's kind of awestruck by the fact that this is going to happen, and eventually later on kind of is like, yeah, this is going to happen, so I'm going to do what I'm going to do to kind of save my son. And he gets along with Rose Byrne's character that he's going to actually take his son and her daughter to these cave systems to try and wait out the solar flare, which is probably not going to help them out in this situation because this storm is pretty devastating, and you'll eventually see that at the end of the film. There's also these people called the Watchers, or the Whispering People, which the kids call them, and several times throughout this movie they kind of meet them, one of which they actually steal the kids in a car when they're at a gas station. Rose Byrne kind of takes the children after going to Nicolas Cage's home because, you know, he's got this giant door that he stole from the school that has all these numbers and stuff written on them. He's trying to figure out the code so that he can kind of hopefully go to that location and actually save himself and his family. She steals the kids and actually goes to a gas station where pretty much raiding the place and stealing a bunch of water and food and stuff and supplies so that they can hopefully wait out this solar flare. this won't actually pay off in the end, but eventually the Watcher, whispering people, pretty much steal Rose Byrne and Caleb and her daughter, and they pretty much steal her vehicle. She goes after him and eventually gets plowed into by a semi-truck, which is kind of horrific to see, especially since someone like myself who's been in a couple accidents. Not really fond of accidents in movies, especially since they seem kind of realistic, and after I've had a couple accidents myself, I don't really want to be in that situation like she's in, but I kind of overlook it just because of the fact that it is part of the movie. She kind of sees this little rock that they kind of leave. It's kind of a black rock that they kind of leave whenever they are going to take the children, or just to kind of send them a message that they're there. Nicolas Cage eventually finds one himself when Caleb actually sees sort of the solar flare incident happen, and he's kind of staring out of his window at his home, and it's happening during early stages of the film, and he sees this horrifying image of animals and stuff kind of running for shelter as everything's pretty much on fire, and you see Caleb kind of scream, and that's when Nicolas Cage pretty much comes to his aid and tries to track down Rose Byrne's character. And throughout this movie, he's kind of trying to save his son. He doesn't realize till the ending of the film that the Watchers, or the Whispering People, have come to kind of protect Caleb as well as the children. They're going to take him these giant spaceships that happen at the ending of this movie, spoiler alert, and actually take him to different planets so that they can repopulate that place and kind of make it a new Earth. It's kind of similar to that of the Garden of Eden story, which I think Alex Proyas was actually borrowing a lot of in this film. And this movie, with the visual effects and everything, like normally movies that have a lot of CGI and stuff like that, they don't hold up, but the solar flare sequence at this movie at the end, the train crash sequence, and the airplane sequence definitely do hold up. They're pretty frightening sequences. A lot of these actors get really cool one-liners within this film, and Nicolas Cage does get a little bit crazy at parts of this movie, but he still kind of tames himself down compared to some of the other roles that he's been in. And I'm a huge fan of Alex Proyas as a director. I liked iRobot, I liked Knowing. Some of his earlier work is really great up until Gods of Egypt, which I don't have anything against Alex Proyas as a director. I think he's a very fantastic director, and he can definitely deliver the visual effects when he wants to and tell a pretty interesting story. But for me personally, Knowing is one of his best films, and that's why I'm going to give it a solid A. I think this movie definitely deserves it, especially since all the cast and characters deliver a really haunting performance. There's several sequences in this movie that feel sort of like a horror film, mostly in the beginning where you see sort of Lucinda get sort of the numbers, and she's scratching the numbers off sort of her desk and the walls of the school. And then later on in the film where you see Nicolas Cage, they go back to the home that Lucinda lived in, and they're kind of looking for the numbers and stuff like that and what's going on. And you see all these kind of pages kind of plastered on the wall, and it's kind of biblical references and stuff, and kind of dark and dreary. And then you see sort of the Watcher people, or the Whispering People, kind of ambush Caleb and the younger kid in the film, and they're kind of surrounding the vehicle, and they're going to try and steal Caleb. And then you see Caleb kind of take the wheel and actually hit the alarm and everything, which kind of freaks them out and scares them away. And then you kind of get that scene where Nicolas Cage kind of goes after one of them. Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. There's some tense drama that happens within this film, but it's all done for a really great effect, and it does pay off towards the end. So with the visual effects, the storytelling, the sort of musical score that comes into play towards the end of the film, I really like the fact they use a lot of violins and stuff with the solar flare sequence, that it's not sort of a song that kind of comes into play, that it's actually something that is really haunting, similar to that of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I still have to review on my channel. But I could go on and on about this movie, but I definitely want you guys to check this out. Knowing is now on Netflix right now, so if you do get the chance to see this, you should definitely do so. That's why I'm going to give Knowing an A. I think this is one of Nicolas Cage's best movies, and I think Ben Mendelsohn does a really great job, as well as Rose Byrne and all the other cast and characters, especially the child actors in this movie. So that is why I'll give this movie an A+. I think this movie definitely deserves it, so go check it out. And as always, guys, hopefully you guys learn a little thing or two about the movie industry, and rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.